They provided a stable family environment in his life at a time when he needed it. They supported me in athletics. He remembers once or twice when he needed some extra practice running to get in better shape. He remembers Grandma riding her bike with him on the gravel road. He fesses up. I was a troubled child and made Grandma rightfully angry several times. One time I was a 13-year-old and I mouthed off to her, and she grabbed the closest handy object she could to spank me. It was a bouncy ball paddle. And she began spanking him, and he just started laughing, which only made her angrier. But he said, I don't think I ever mouthed off to her after that again. Audrey shares a story, and I think it's a story that's maybe become a family legend, involving a dance and a cicada. Family members probably know it well. Doris and Claude were at a dance, and it was crowded, it was hot, stuffy, and they went outside to catch some air. And when they were outside catching air, that's not the only thing they caught. Now, because time has lapsed, stories morph in the way they do. I don't know exactly who caught the cicada, but anyway, one of them has the cicada, and I think by this time, this generation, the cicada is like, 2 feet long. It's, one of those fishing stories. But they have it in their hand and they're dancing, and in order for them to have room to dance, they squeeze it so that others will back off, so it will chirp, and so they're able to dance on this date. Tony shares, Grandma always read to her. She loved it every time. Grandma would read to her. And every time she read to her, Grandma fell asleep. She couldn't make it through a book. And Tony said, we're not talking about some great novel. We're talking about a children's book, like a Dr. Seuss book. Tony was remembering all the events that transpired with the cousins growing up and the family events. And she said the house was always a house of laughter. Ruth says, I remember going out to milk the cow at night with Mom. The snow sparkled like diamonds as it crunched beneath our feet on the walk from the house to the barn. She says, Mom taught me songs from her childhood, and we would sing together while she milked, and it was a special time for me. That in this family is multi-generational. As a father to some girls, they sing with my wife, and I don't know where that comes from. That's foreign to me. I didn't grow up in a house of singing. Well, we can't sing, and so that necessitates that we don't sing. But I read that story, and I was thinking how that's been passed on from your mother to you, to Tony, to our children. A special memory, a multi-generational legacy. Ruth shares Wednesdays with my mom were sometimes fun, filled with laughter, and sometimes exhausting and filled with frustration. They were always educational. And I learned much about my mom, my dad, and myself as I talked with and cared for my mother. And at this time, the family has asked me to open it up for anyone else to share a memory. You can come up here if you'd like. You can do it from your pew. So at this time, is there anyone who wants to share something? We're not phone calling in stories. Tim?
Actually, I had to type this up so I wouldn't lose my spot. But whenever if anybody ever asked me to tell a story about Grandma, I always told the exact same one. Happened when I was about 8, 10 years old. If anybody remembers when Grandma broke her wrist, had it in a cast. I was over at her house one time and walking into the bathroom I was over by the kitchen and been in there 1,000 times, so I already knew exactly where the light switch was. Always reached in before I ever even crossed the threshold of the door, turned on the light. This one time my hand went up and touched something that wasn't supposed to be there. I had no idea what it was. But for those of you who've been there, you remember there was always that air freshener about a foot up on the wall, up above the light switch. And I thought first, well, maybe that was it. But then I realized, no, my hand hadn't gone up far enough to hit that. So I peeked in, and there was a 5-foot bull snake wrapped around that air freshener, draped all the way down to the light switch, and my hand had gone up and hit the side of that snake. So I went into the kitchen where Grandma was and told her there's a snake in this bathroom, and she told me to show it to her. So we went in there, and it wasn't there.
Oh.
So she spotted it pretty quick. It was already down on the floors behind the toilet. It was stretched out from the tub all the way to the sink. So she went in real quick into the kitchen and grabbed a meat cleaver and hit that snake one time, and the meat cleaver's pretty dull, so it didn't kill it, didn't do anything, just pinned it right there. Well, she didn't want to lift up the cleaver and let the snake go. She couldn't kill it with that thing either, so she told me, go get the hatchet. So I ran out, got the hatchet, and brought it in to her, and it wasn't much sharper than that cleaver. But it never ceases to amaze me, seeing Grandma there with a broken wrist and a cast, holding that cleaver with one hand and just chopping the head off of that snake with that dull hatchet. But I've always held it in my head that Grandma has always been the toughest person that I'll probably ever know.
Anyone else?
If you knew my Auntie Doris, she always wore a hat. I loved her little hats, and she wasn't so sassy in them. But Bruce and I were at Walmart several years back, and she came in and she was just hopping mad. And I'm like, oh, Doris, what is wrong? And she says, well, that young whippersnapper policeman pulled me over. And I said, what for? And she said, he said I wasn't wearing my seatbelt. Now, I can't remember how old she was. She says, I'm just too old to wear that seatbelt, and I've got issues. She says, I'm going to the doctor, and I'm going to tell him that. And I'll make it take all the way through the rest of the stories. I kind of felt sorry for that little policeman. I know you noticed that was sorry.
What else? Well, the family's been gathering almost, I think, every evening and eating meals, and there's been a lot of other stories, and I don't know if this is quite the place to share every one thing that was said. So with that, we'll move into the slideshow.